Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Let's Fix Stuff's Meet the Rocket Scientist podcast series. In our Meet the Rocket Scientist podcast, we introduce you to subject matter experts on topics that truly matter. These topics may have nothing whatsoever to do with rocket science, but as an aerospace engineer to whom many have given the moniker rocket scientist as a result of my work on aerospace programs such as the International Space Station, I believe it's perfectly appropriate to extend this cool term rocket scientist to beyond the aerospace engineers. In my book, anybody who boldly goes where no one has gone before and pushes the limits of knowledge in their particular field should be granted the opportunity to be known as a rocket scientist. It's with this understanding that I'm honored to introduce today's rocket scientist, Trevor Loudon. Trevor is an exceptional American patriot with Kiwi roots. He is an author, filmmaker, and public speaker from Christchurch, New Zealand, who is no stranger to the national stage in America. For more than 30 years, he has researched the radical left, Marxist, and terrorist movements and their covert influence on mainstream politics. Among his credits are documentaries such as The Enemies Within the Church, and his latest expose on the connection between Black Lives Matter organization and the Chinese Communist Party. He's one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on identifying the efforts to undermine our American system of government. I wish everyone in America was as passionate about the defense of American values as he is. Fittingly, the theme of this episode is how to fight sedition in America. With that being said, welcome to this Let's Fix Stuff podcast, Trevor.
Well, it's an honor to be on, Patrick, and it's a real honor to be bestowed with the honorary rocket science title. So thank you.
Just be aware that sometimes the rockets don't get all the way off the pad. So
yes, I know there's been a few disasters in that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. There's so many different topics we can unpack. You've got quite the varied history, and you've done a lot of different research on important topics, and many Americans, frankly, are not well schooled about. I mean, it's tough to identify sedition, for example, if you don't even know how our system of government is intended to operate in the first place. So we got to overcome the civics knowledge barrier first. But assuming that we're going to go off and get educated on how our system of government is supposed to work, what are some of the major sedition movements that you've observed over the past few years that are active here in America that we need to be aware of?
Well, basically Marxist revolution that's unfolded. Been going on for some time, just the crest of the world. It's like you lean against your doorway every day for 10 years. Then one day it collapses because the termites have been burrowing away so much and weakened the foundations, they're ready to collapse. Well, that's where we are now. Now, so what you've got is a whole raft of communist parties: Communist Party USA, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Workers' World Party, Liberation Road, Party for Socialism and Liberation. They can probably muster at least 150,000 people between them, which doesn't sound a heck of a lot, in the size of America. But remember, Lenin took over Russia with 2,000 Bolsheviks.
Yeah.
A country of 130 million people at the time, I believe. So these people have made revolution a science. And so they have worked a long time to destabilize the government, to discredit the American way of life, the American system. So most young kids in high school today grow up thinking that America is an evil country founded by horrible white slave owners, and it only got rich by ripping off the third world.
Yeah, the Howard Zinn narrative.
The Howard Zinn narrative. The Communist Party member, the secret Communist Party member, Howard Zinn, that is now taught in high schools all over the country. Yeah. So and young kids
and
grade schools.
Yeah.
I had a friend the other day. He was sick of the indoctrination his little girl was getting in public school. So he put her in. And the first week she comes back doing a project on Cesar Chavez, the Marxist labor agitator, portraying him as a hero. The guy used to bomb people. So you've had a very deep system of infiltration for a number of years, especially Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America and Liberation Road. These are the groups that were inside the Democratic Party, and they're all pro-Chinese to some degree or another.
And just a second on that. I mean, you highlighted they're working through, it broke up a little bit, but they're working through the Democratic Party, today's Democratic Party, correct? And this is not the party of JFK. This is a much different Democratic Party.
This hugely is. Look, I say in my movie Enemies Within, I say there's about 100 members of the House and 20 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass an FBI background check to drive a school bus.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be allowed to sell you stamps at the post office because they couldn't pass any form of background check. They're working with the Communist Party USA or Democratic Socialists of America or Liberation Road or with Iran or with Cuba or with China. They are basically working for the other team.
And by the way, when we highlight the other team, I just want to highlight, guys, this isn't, Communist Party is not like having a Libertarian Party or a Socialist Party even, or it's much different than Democratic and Republican Party. This is talking about undermining our system of government, subverting our Constitution, taking over America without planes and bombs and tanks and stuff like that. It's actually subverting us from within, like Trevor was talking about with the termites at the frame of the door. That's what we're talking about. So please understand that this is not just another political party. This is actually an attempt at undermining our system of government.
Yeah, this is a political mafia. It's a political gang. This is gangsterism. And the big difference between, say, the Communist Party or Democratic Socialists of America is when they get power, they don't ever give it up again.
Yeah.
You can elect a Republican, then vote in a Democrat. You can elect a Democrat, then vote in a Republican. Once the communists have taken over, there is no more Democrat or Republican Party. They have complete power for the rest of your life. And so this is the critical difference there. They're like the Nazis. The communists are like the Nazis. They're all about power. They use the democratic process to gain the power. Mm-hmm. Got it. The democracy goes out the door and they have complete total control over your life and your family's existence for as long as which will be forever if they can do it.
And we're seeing this in a little bit of a microcosm here in the state of Michigan with COVID policy, right?
Yeah.
Governor Whitmer, a Democrat, took over and used COVID as an excuse to assert state of emergency here in the state of Michigan. And when it was determined that she no longer had the authority to assert the state of emergency, that didn't stop her. She kept on doing it. And 6 months after that state of emergency had expired, it took a Michigan Supreme Court ruling to say you don't have that authority. And then she, even with that, you can just see her clinging on with her fingernails on the ledge here. She said, "I still have it for 28 days until this actually takes effect." And then she's currently engaged in using all the administrative agencies to implement her rule via those agencies without any lawful basis and without the approval of the legislature. So you're right. Once they grab on, they don't let go, and they're using that COVID now as an excuse to undermine our elections and free and fair elections, which is how they're going to keep power forever. So you're spot on with that.
And you got to understand that, I did math before Common Core, and I know you're a scientist, so you can probably work out percentages.
Yeah.
Look, this is the way the communists intend if the Democrats win. It's real simple. Hillary Clinton promised that if she was elected, she would legalize every single illegal immigrant in the country within 100 days of taking office and give them all citizenship and voting rights. Well, according to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that is now 22 million people, 22 million illegals in the country. We know that on past patterns, they will vote at least 80 to 90% Democrat, probably higher. That will give the Democrats 15, 16, 17 million new voters overnight. Now, most American elections are decided by less than 3 million votes. Mitt Romney lost his election by 2.5 million votes, the Republican in 2012. Donald Trump won by about 300,000 votes, thanks to the wisdom of your founding fathers and the Electoral College, and actually lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million. So you imagine Joe Biden gets elected, he legalizes every single illegal immigrant in the country. The Democrats have 16, 17, 18 million new voters overnight. Yeah. You lose Texas, you lose Florida, you lose Georgia, you lose North Carolina, Arizona. There is never another Republican president, ever.
Right.
You know, that's what I mean. What they will use every dirty trick in the book to get complete power. You know, on our side, we believe in rule of law, fair play, following the law, even if we don't agree with it. The left, especially the hard left, which now controls the Democratic Party, just believes in raw power.
Right.
That's it. That's their only guiding ethic.
So why do you think more people aren't aware of this? I mean, we talked a little bit about before the show around censorship. What happens when you start bringing up topics like the ties between the Black Lives Matter and Chinese Communist Party? I'm sure all the networks are like knocking on your door saying, hey, we really want to dig into this and find out more information about it, right?
Look, we released a video that shows conclusively that leading people around Black Lives Matter are working with the Chinese Communist Party officials in San Francisco.
Yep.
We've got it in their own words. You'd think that every major network in the country would want to know that. You know, Black Lives Matter, the biggest social movement for the last 20 years, the one that multiple corporations are giving multiple millions of dollars to, the churches are taking a knee to, that has impacted our politics on both sides of the aisle. They are working with the Chinese Communist Party, which is an enemy of the United States. You'd think that would be used. No, it gets shut down straight away on social media. We've had to change platforms to get it out there. But this is endemic now. Conservative constitutional thought is being shut down all over the place right now.
Yeah, and that's available on Rumble, just so people know. And so, but you put a fine point on it. When people are kneeling to Black Lives Matter because of this connection that they have, and because they're acting at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party, you are kneeling to the Chinese Communist Party. And people need to be aware of this. And so that raised fist in the air, everybody should know that that's not a symbol of Black unity. That's a symbol of the Communist Party, and it goes back as early as communism, itself. And people need. My University of Michigan football team put the old six fists on the back of their helmet this past weekend. I can't even watch college football anymore.
Well, that's right. But this is a deconstruction of America. But this is what I say. We're in a revolution, and a whole bunch of our businesses are bought into this for their own craven reasons. A, to curry favor, and B, because many of them have big business deals with communist China, big tech, Google, Facebook. They're all trying to get into the Chinese market, or they're already in the Chinese market. They do not want to expose anything that will upset that relationship. So you have pro-Chinese communists burning down cities all over America and actually killing people and shaking. And you're not, the whole Black Lives Matter rioting scenario, completely Chinese directed operation, timed for election year, to do three things. One, to bring down the president. Two, wreck the economy. And with the economy goes the US military budget.
Yeah.
And if the US military budget is cut, guess which country then rules the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know about the aggression and expansionism that's going on in China. I was thinking maybe part of it, what happened in Michigan, is that the governor shut down our state to hit the economy to go off and hit Trump. So,
well, it is. It's the Democratic Party. Look, Tucker Carlson had a man on the show recently, Brian Dean Wright, a former CIA officer and a Democrat. And he said, look, Tucker, I'm so embarrassed. The Democratic Party is following the communist Chinese line over COVID. Shut down. And Tucker said, why? He says, well, some of them are useful idiots. Some of them are paid Chinese agents. But see, this is China. The Communist Party of China has to destroy Trump because he has caned them on trade.
Oh, yeah.
He stood with the Hong Kong protesters and he stood with the anti-communist candidate in the Taiwanese election who won. The Communist Party of China is 800 families. They rule that country like a mafia. If America can Communist Party of China and embarrass them in front of people, Trump was doing, will finish them off. If Trump is returned, he will do to the Communist Party of China what Reagan did to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. He will take them down without firing a shot. And you imagine the boon to the world we will have with all the energy and enterprise and culture of the Chinese people turned towards good rather than evil. What a boon that will be.
That would be an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to it. So and so we know that the media is not going to go off and get this story out. We know a lot of the folks that are in some of the legacy media outlets in particular have strong ties. I mean, they depend on a lot of their advertising dollars from the Chinese Communist Party right now. Frankly, one of the best news outlets that I've seen on what's really going on in China is actually a alternative news channel. It's a YouTube channel, China Uncensored, with Chris Chappell. And I've learned more about geopolitics watching his show because he does a very good job of analyzing these topics. And it's always been a foreshadowing of what's coming to America. Everything from the Chinese social credit system, which we're seeing enabled with cancel culture here in America right now. It's kind of the primitive form of that, if you will. But there are news sources that will do it. The tough part is, and platforms like these, you have to go on off platform in order to get that word out. I mean, Rumble's just getting started. And so we got to go off and promote some of these alternative platforms to get it out there.
Yeah, we are being deplatformed. This, look, Trump got into office and he walked into a 90% completed revolution.
Yeah.
And I think he had no idea what he was walking into. He thought, I'm a businessman, I'll just give orders and people will do what I say. Well, he has understood now that the deep state, which is essentially communist, had control of virtually every major aspect of the US government. It is that bad. And the president would have finished this off.
Yeah, Brennan was behind all this, and his ties to the Communist Party are undeniable. And here's a guy at the head of our intelligence apparatus in America with tangible ties to the Communist Party.
Yeah, well, look, he should never even been allowed to enter the CIA, let alone become. But Comey, the head of the FBI, was also had a communist background. Diana West's great book, The Red Thread, goes into the pro-Soviet communist backgrounds of most of the key players in the anti-Trump conspiracy. So can you imagine, people have worked for the Soviet Union their entire lives and now running the idea that President Trump's working with Putin, when they have been working with Putin and his predecessors their entire political careers. But this is Leninism, this is Zelenskyism. Accuse your opposition of what you're doing yourself.
Exactly.
And that's what they've been doing.
And that's exactly what they've been doing. So whether it's Ukraine with subverting the process and looking for political favors, well, it wasn't Trump doing that. It was the Biden family doing that, like working with the Russian collusion or whatever. That wasn't Trump. That was the Biden family and Hillary Clinton to a large extent as well.
And Hillary Clinton, yeah.
So you're right. It is exactly. I got a cruder term for that political approach here, but which I won't air on this podcast. But it really is a case of they're accusing us of everything that they're actually guilty of, which helps them from a creative writing standpoint. They know how to go off and set the plot. That's for sure.
And so we're always on the defensive because they're accusing us of stuff. It's like, when are you going to stop beating your wife?
I know.
Patrick? When it's like, I don't beat my wife. You don't buy into their argument. They call you a racist if you criticize Black Lives Matter. Don't say, I'm not a racist, blah, blah, blah. You say, you are a communist agitator. You don't care about black lives. You don't care about anything but the revolution. Stop your lying. That's the only way to deal with these people. call them out. You know, they're only trying to bluff you out because they
So-
have no truth on their side whatsoever.
So who are the biggest actors on this stage that we need to be aware of, and we need to highlight? Anything that they say, they're probably shaping the direction of where we don't want to go?
Well, all of it comes back, I believe, to most of it comes back to the pro-Chinese and pro-Russian communist parties. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Communist Party USA, Liberation Road, which controls Black Lives Matter, works directly with the Chinese. So this all comes back to the Chinese and the Cubans and the Russians and the Iranians. And you have big players in this country like Soros and others, but they are really just tools for the Russians.
Right.
A lot of people freak out and they think George Soros is the founder of all evil. He's just a cog in the machine.
Agreed. Yeah.
If he died tomorrow, the whole thing would continue to roll on. Americans need to understand that their government has been deeply subverted by agents of Moscow, Tehran, Beijing, Caracas, and Havana. They are calling the shots. You've got a whole. That's why you've got a nuclear deal with Iran, because so many of your senators were taking Iran and still are. An Iranian PAC elected 4 Democrats last election cycle. You know, 3 in Southern California. Yeah. You have got the Cuban. You've got a whole bunch of your Congress people working with the Cubans, working for the Cubans. You got people like Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California, who was on the Intelligence Committee and now heads the Democrat side of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, who's been working with the Chinese for 40 years and for the Soviets before that. But nobody calls these people out. As I said, you got 20 to 25 senators, including Stabenow from Michigan and Gary Peters to a degree, who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus.
And I would probably venture a guess that the reason a lot of people don't stand up is because they'll get accused of McCarthyism. They'll be and we have a bunch of cowards up there that are afraid to go off and stand up for America. And I'm seeing that here in the state of Michigan. All it takes is one Michigan House rep. We have a 58 seat majority in the state house in Michigan. All it takes is one Michigan State House rep to go off and start the articles of impeachment here against Governor Whitmer for all of our unlawful actions, yet they remain silent. And in fairness to them, it is difficult when you got the whole media arranged against you, because they play a game of whack-a-mole. That's part of the Saul Alinsky technique that's up there. As soon as you step out of line, I mean, I obviously personally experienced that. It's not a wonderful feeling. Nobody wants to go through that and be called every name in the book disingenuously. So it gets kind of frustrating, but there is a lack of courage that I've seen across the spectrum.
Look, when Steve King was attacked for when he did an interview with the New York Times, Steve King, the former congressman from Iowa, he said some perfectly true statements. They lied about what he said, and the left piled on him, and the Republicans backed off.
Right.
You know, when Michelle Bachmann and 3 or 4 other Congress members a few years ago raised some questions about Muslim Brotherhood infiltration of the government, you had Republicans like McCain and Marco Rubio attacking them, doing the enemy's work for them.
I know, that's what happened to me in Michigan. I mean, as soon as I called out the ties between Dr. Abdul Sayed, which is a Democratic governor for candidate for governor, who got over 30% of the vote, by the way, in the Democratic primary, when I highlighted his ties to the Muslim Brotherhood in America, I got denounced by my own party. And I'll tell you, this guy, this Abdul Sayed, he signed on to a letter of support for Mohamed Morsi, the former president of Egypt, who was running under a freedom and justice moniker. And immediately when he took office, he changed their constitution and made it a pro-Sharia constitution. The Coptic Christians suffered immense persecution. And it wasn't until the military got in and said, hey, you sold us a bad bill of goods. You're getting deposed from office, and we're going to get you back. We're going to replace you. and put you under arrest. Did he get held accountable? Abdul al-Sayed actually supported him, put in a letter of support for that person, and yet he gets away with no introspection here by the media, and it's just frustrating.
Look, al-Sayed was openly affiliated with Democratic Socialists of America, which is a communist organization, the same one that Rashida Tlaib belongs to. So this is a and that John Conyers belonged to too, by the way. This is a Marxist organization, but you're not allowed to say this, because, but who invented the term McCarthyism? The Communist Party invented the term McCarthyism to shut down anybody who criticized communists.
Right.
Now they've got other words: racist, Islamophobe, homophobe, bigot. And you got these Republicans, they might call me a racist, they might call me whatever. Look, your future of your country's at stake, sir. Your future of the children and grandchildren you profess to love is at stake, and you won't stand up and take a little bit of name calling to protect this country. We're not in the state we are because the communists are so brave and smart. We're in the state we are because our side has been so weak and gutless for so long. Not everybody, not you and quite a few others, but the leadership of the GOP has done huge damage to this country by not standing up when it should have stood up.
Right, and ultimately it all comes down to risk aversion. Right.
Yeah.
And these guys are just avoiding all risk for the sake of stability. And, anybody who's in business, anybody who's lived on this earth, some of the things that are most important to you are some of the things that are worth risking for. And if you don't really care enough to risk your lives, fortune, and sacred honor, as some other individuals a couple hundred years once said here, then how much do you really believe in your country? How much do you believe in your oath of office? How much do you believe in this constitutional framework that we've lived under for so many years?
Look, that's exactly right. These people take an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and they completely ignore the domestic enemy side of it, which is why the domestic enemies are now on the verge of taking this great country down. Look, anybody who looks out there right now and tells me this is not a communist revolution we're going on under is absolutely deluded. This is totally what it is, but most Republicans won't say it. The Democrats are on board with it, and the media is either complicit or ignoring it. How can the Department of Homeland Security put out its annual report a couple of weeks ago. And we're in a communist revolution where Antifa and the Chinese-backed Black Lives Matter are burning cities and killing cops. And all they talked about in the whole report was white supremacists, all 7 of them, right? While we have a communist revolution going on in front of us, and there's not one mention of Antifa or Black Lives Matter in the Department of Homeland Security report. What does that tell you? But just think about this. I'll give you 2 examples. Now, the head of the Homeland Security Committee in the Congress is Benny Thompson from Mississippi, longtime Communist Party supporter. He went to Cuba in 2000, did a deal with Fidel Castro to give a whole bunch of American kids free medical scholarships in Cuba, many of them the sons and daughters of Communist Party members. Now they're all over the country, and I guarantee most of them have been involved in these riots. Now this guy heads the Department of Homeland Security. He should be being investigated by the Department of Homeland Security, not heading it. Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee, the committee that oversees the FBI and the Justice Department. Now, Jerry Nadler has been a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America, the same as Ocasio-Cortez, the same as Rashida Tlaib, the same as John Conyers, a Marxist group. So he oversees the Justice Department and the FBI. He got a woman sprung from jail, a former Weather Underground terrorist leader, who now serves on the board of the funding wing of Black Lives Matter. He got her sprung. Now, the Justice Department and the FBI is trying to catch all these people who be burning the cities. These people are Jerry Nadler's friends. The people the FBI is trying to catch are Jerry Nadler's friends. So do you think that might make them hesitate a little bit? Am I going to go after my boss's friends? Just think about this. There's no background checks in Congress, right? So the FBI finally grows a pair and they go to the Judiciary Committee and says, we understand there's 100 Congress members working with the Muslim Brotherhood, the Communist Party, the Cubans, the Chinese, or the Iranians. We need to start they have no background checks on these guys. We need to start investigating congressmen. Is that all right, Mr. Nadler?
Yeah.
And by the way, Mr. Nadler, you're on the list. Do you mind?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen to their budget next year?
Yeah, I know.
Or their pensions? So the problem is the fox is now guarding the hen house. That's why the deep state does not get prosecuted, because the deep state controls the Justice Department and the FBI and most of the Congress.
Yeah, you highlighted something very important for a lot of folks right now, is that we're hearing rumors of indictments. We're seeing examples of people's behavior that should be prosecuted. Everything from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell and all the stuff dealing with human trafficking. There's the outright spying on the Trump campaign by the Obama administration. You've got example after example of seditious practices, frankly, happening in our government, yet there's zero prosecutions. And I think you hit the nail on the head why nothing happened. So against that backdrop, and this gets kind of frustrating for folks who are trying to get us back and restore appreciation for the principles upon which this country was founded. How do we fight back?
Well, we've got a number of ways. The first thing is to get the president reelected.
Yeah.
Because he has got a whole bunch of measures ready to go. He knows what the deep state is now. He knows who the enemies are. He knows what the Chinese are doing with Black Lives Matter and the violence they've been doing and the deliberate spread of COVID. He understands we're at war with China and it has to be dealt with. So there's a few things. First of all, he's got to start bringing back the Foreign Agent Registration Act. It's there, but nobody applies it. So this is what I would do if I was the president. This is the first thing I'd do. I'd declare an amnesty. I would say every foreign agent in this country, whether you're a Chinese spy, an Iranian agent, or a businessman who's doing dirty deals with foreign countries, or a crooked congressman, you've got 1 month to come forward. We'll set up a special agency take a few out of the bottom reaches of the FBI, maybe a few ex-CIA guys, trustworthy guys. We'll set up a commission. You've got 1 month to come forward to this commission, and you will tell us all of your networks and expose everything you've done. And if you do that, we will give you amnesty from prosecution and even witness protection if it's required. You got 1 month. You don't do that, we're coming after you. If you have not left the country by the end of a month or come forward, we're going to come after you and prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. And if we find you guilty, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. That would throw every foreign intelligence network in the country into complete confusion. Every Iranian spy would be thinking, that businessman I'm paying off, is he going to take the deal with the government? Is next time I go to a meeting with him, is he going to be wearing a wire? Am I going to go down for 25 years and sink in Leavenworth? I better get out of the country. I better shut down my networks, or I better go and take the deal myself.
I think
every Chinese spy, every Iranian agent, every Russian agent, every Hezbollah man working in this country would have 1 month to get out or come forward or risk going to jail. And as some people started to turn themselves in, you'd get more and more information. You just roll all these networks up. The country would be transformed. It would be transformed in a few weeks. And then you start going through all the government departments, and you close some down because some of them are just non-constitutional. But you go through the government departments, reinstitute loyalty oaths, background checks, and all the things we used to do as a matter of course. for 50 or 100 years that have now gone completely by the wayside. Reinstitute those things, and then in Congress, you can't background check someone who's being elected, but you can't, because the people choose who gets elected. But what you can do is say, if you want to serve on a committee like intelligence or homeland security or education or judiciary, you must go through a background check. Half the Democrats would have to stand down straight off, and a few Republicans would too.
Right, plenty of room on the General Studies Committee for them. They can.
Yeah, they can be looking at corn growing in Puerto Rico or something like that. You know, they can maybe
they can read the bills and apply a yes or no vote to it. I served in the Michigan Senate my last 2 years almost without being on a committee, thanks to a very let's just say corrupt Senate Majority Leader. Who had an issue with me advising him that I didn't come there to serve him. I came to serve the people of Michigan. So
wow, that's a novel idea, Patrick.
Yeah, what do you know? And so it is possible to serve and serve with integrity and merit without having a committee assignment.
But look, the Democrats would stop picking candidates that they knew could never get on a committee. You know, why would they spend a whole bunch of money electing some guy who could never serve on a committee? Because he's worked with the communists for 20 years. That would clean out the Democratic Party, clean out the Republican Party. This is common sense national security stuff. Do you think the Russians would allow 100 pro-Americans to serve in their Duma? Do you think the Chinese would allow 100 people they knew were working for America to serve in their whatever that in their Communist Party consultative body? No, they wouldn't, because they know what would happen to their country if they did.
I think that's a brilliant strategy, and from a top-down perspective, that nails it. But I want to make sure that everybody listening here realizes that there's an individual responsibility as well around this, and there's a huge bottoms-up. And number one, it comes with getting a good civics education, understanding how our system of government is supposed to work, and reading provisions in our Constitution, such as we're supposed to be protecting ourselves from enemies, foreign and domestic, right? So
well, that's right. These were smart people. They knew that America could never be taken from the outside, or not easily. But if America was ever going to be taken down, it would be from the inside. Yeah. You know, America was founded on the concept that your rights came from God, not the king. This was a novel idea, and it offended every dictator on the planet, because every dictator invoked divine right of kings. God speaks to me, and he tells me you've got to give every second son to my army. You've got to give every third daughter to my. Right. This is, if you disobey me, you're disobeying God.
We got a governor acting that way right now.
Yeah, well, Gretchen Whitmer, exactly. She thinks she has the divine right of kings.
Yeah.
Well, so America's had enemies right from the start, because every dictator hated the idea that you had a system where your rights came from God, and that government's only role was to protect those rights. So you've had enemies right from the start trying to take down this wonderful experiment. And so for 150 years, your politicians understood this, and they had very stringent security measures in the government. They made it very hard for spies or terrorists or traitors to get inside your government. But from the 60s onwards, and it accelerated under Clinton and even worse under Obama, that's all gone.
Yeah.
You have treason is epidemic in America now, and everybody's getting in on the deal. You know, well, if he's on the take from Iran, well, maybe I should get a few bucks from Cuba. You know, he's doing deals with China. Why don't I get my piece of the action too? We've got to see these people go to jail. You know, the whole ethos of I'm in it to get my bit out of government will disappear very quickly if you saw somebody like Joe Biden or Hunter Biden go to jail for 25 years.
Absolutely.
And you saw a whole bunch of these people. But look, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be everybody. You have to arrest a few people. You give amnesty to a whole bunch of people. That's a very kind thing to do. You know, I understand you've betrayed your country. I understand you've made a mistake. You set it right. You come to us and you turn all your networks over tell us everything you've done, and we will forgive you. You'll never hold public office again, but you can live out the rest of your life. If there's any issues remaining, that's between you and God.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant strategy, and it kind of it essentially uses Saul Alinsky's "the action is in the reaction" to our advantage for a change.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, at the surface, you sit there and say amnesty. No, they need to be held accountable. But no, if you take a step back and look at what the domino effect is of doing that, like you've outlined eloquently here today, I think it's brilliant. And for me, I mean, it gives us hope. So step one, we got to reelect President Trump.
Absolutely.
All right, because none of this stuff happens if that doesn't happen. And you know, say what you will about our president, there is no doubt in my mind that he loves America, and he's not going to let it be undermined in any way, shape, or form. And I know you love America too, despite your Kiwi roots here. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've done over the years and how you stay engaged, and you've done your part to wake up Americans to what's happening. Sometimes it takes that kind of I say outsider's perspective, but frankly, you're more insider than most Americans nowadays, and you understand what
you can always see your neighbor's problems more clearly than they can see their own, can't you?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I made a career of that as a management consultant, right? You go in there and you highlight things that a lot of people inside the company already knew were wrong, but you needed somebody to go off and put it in the check mark and saying, no, we're validating exactly what you've observed. This is something we need to go off and implement, and then give them a plan to go off and get things fixed, which is exactly what you've done here today. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you for all your efforts over the years. And, you know, together we can go off and fight back against sedition. First step on fixing that, though, is you got to recognize that there is an enemy among us.
Yeah.
There is an enemy within. There is active sedition in America, and we need to expose it, and we need fearless patriots that are willing to go off and do just that, and recognize that there will be consequences, but some things are worth those consequences. And I think America is one of those things.
Well, exactly. And the consequences of not doing it are way, way worse, are they not?
Absolutely.
And if you love your kids and you love your country, and you love your kids and you love your country, how can you not stand up?
Amen. Well, thank you very much, Trevor, and God bless you. And thank you for being our resident rocket scientist on this episode of Meet the Rocket Scientist.
It's an honor to be on, Patrick. So thanks for the opportunity.